Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. I don't know what time in the world you're at, but it is Carla, and I am here to speak with you with Andrew Gryf Paterson. We are going to be speaking in English, but we're going to learn about him and what he does. He's from Helsinki, Finland, a country I have never visited, but would like to visit someday. And like always, we are, oh my gosh, we are sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an online organization creating peace throughout the world, one conversation at a time. And today is from the United States to Helsinki, Finland. Can you introduce yourself, Andrew?
Sure, I can. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's a late evening here on Tuesday, the 10th of September, and I'm actually sitting in the center of Helsinki, almost in an old wooden house, which is actually managed by the Helsinki International Artist Program. And that says something about me because I'm an artist now of 20 years practice. I'm 44 at the moment, and I have had 20-year practice as an artist, but I also like to say that I'm an organizer, which means a few different things. One of them is that I do a lot of cultural production work, organizing work, whether it be festivals or workshops. It means also that my idea of making art or doing art is actually rather social and dialogical and often conversational. So it's a pleasure to somehow be part of this exchange here with Carla. And I really much appreciate the ambitions of the Institute also, because for me as an artist who doesn't really make art, but likes to have conversations and do things together with others, has a dialogical practice, let's say, this is a very appropriate way for me to do my artwork, right? And as an organizer, I've been involved over 15 years in Helsinki in making cultural festivals, mostly with non-profit cultural organizations, and one in particular. And before, just there's a hint already that actually I've not lived in Helsinki forever. I come originally from Scotland.
Oh.
And so this is maybe something you didn't recognize, Carla, but I actually grew up and lived in Scotland until my late 20s and left Scotland, spent a few years in England, a little bit over half a year in Germany, and then moved to Finland. And that was in the end of 2002. So actually Helsinki has been my base since the early 2000s. And actually I first came to visit Finland for 5 months in 1998 when I was, 24. So I have a long relationship with Finland, but I'm not Finnish. I have to say that at this moment, it is my ambition to work towards Finnish citizenship. And I expect that maybe in a year or a year and a half, I could say that I'm Scottish and Finnish. And also, I often like to say that I am a Baltic Scot, because I've done a lot of work and have a lot of friends in the Baltic Sea region, and in particular have spent quite a lot of time working and living sometimes in the Baltic states. And so the Baltic Sea, if we include Finland as well, is maybe the thing that's, let's say, around the Baltic Sea, and especially the eastern part of the Baltic Sea, has been my territory of working. And it's where my networks and friendships are at their best. But I have done international work, mostly in Europe, some in North America, but here we're just talking Chicago and New York. and some work in. I guess I have traveled a bit in Russia, and I have done a bit of exchange and collaborations in Australia, in New Zealand, and also in Taiwan. So there's some parts of the world that I've never been to and don't have many connections with. One of them is Africa. Another one is Latin America. And I've never been also to the, let's say, the Indian subcontinent. And one of the exciting things for me at the moment is that in a month's time, I will get to visit actually Pakistan for the first time, and this is where my connection to Rehan comes from. That I'll be a part of a group of artists and cultural professionals who will travel from Europe to visit the United Arab Emirates for a few days, and to Pakistan, in particular Karachi and Lahore, for about a week. And this is quite an exciting exchange. And one of my ambitions for this is that I've never been to that part of the world. One of the reasons I was selected was because I don't have a professional history there. And also, I have an old friend from Glasgow in Scotland who now lives in Islamabad, who I haven't seen for 20 years. And we used to work together in 1999 before I left Scotland. So I come to a sort of 20-year loop, and return to this friendship. But we will meet in Lahore actually on the 31st of October.
How cool.
After not meeting for 20 years. So this is my exciting near future. Yeah, I hope that's a good introduction for you. It maybe makes you intrigued.
Wonderful introduction.
Thank you.
Now, what is your medium in art? Are you a painter?
Oh, okay. Well, I can explain a little history, right? I went to art school in Glasgow. I was when I was 19. I went to study for 4 years graphical printmaking as a in the fine art department. So not design, not visual communications, but fine art. And then when I graduated, which was 97, from Glasgow School of Arts, I was very much interested in digital arts and digital media, and in particular, let's say, what Photoshop can do at that time. And I was of the generation who was on the edge of digitization in printmaking in art school, right? So that means that in my department, only the technicians had a computer, right?
Wow.
The students didn't, but maybe a year later they did. So it was very much on the edge. But I left art school making very expressive hand-drawn works or hand-cut works, because they were prints, and some of the woodcuts, to wanting to work with digital imaging. And I taught myself how to use Photoshop at the time, and how to manipulate images digitally, and how to make small animation loops and things like this, and experiment maybe in a different way than I had before to make a non-static image, right? And that meant that I never really went back to making still images again. And so from the late 90s, I've been working with digital media some way or other, no longer making prints, because it was a bit expensive. Without making money, it was a bit expensive.
Yeah.
And also, if you had the technical ability or the devices, let's say, a laptop would be useful, or a desktop would be useful, then you could, of course, make lots of images, and it didn't cost so much, right? And so I started to explore digital imaging. I also got interested in creative writing, because sometimes you can make a more elaborate image through creative writing than you can through drawing. Poetry, for example, right? You can make better image in poetry sometimes than you can draw.
Absolutely.
right? And I got interested in virtual reality and virtual environments in the late 90s. And actually, in the year 2000, I started a master study, a 1-year master, 12-month master program in computer. This is a little bit sort of computer-aided graphical technology applications, which means basically computer graphics.
Can I ask you a favor? Can you put your hand behind your camera?
Oh yeah, I realized I got the camera the wrong way around. Sorry. Yeah, I'm left-handed, so holding the phone means I put my finger over the lens. Sorry.
And I want to see your whole face.
And I'm looking at you
but
rather.
It looks better this way.
Of course, and I was looking at you, not looking at myself, right?
Right.
So I didn't notice that my finger was over the lens. But anyway, like I got interested in virtual environments and virtual reality, and how you might make virtual spaces. And this was a little bit connected to poetry, and it was a little bit connected to landscapes. And at the time, I still lived in Scotland when I got interested in this, and I went to study in North England how to do this with computer graphics. And so I did a 1-year Master of Science, which was like a conversion master, which meant that I learned how to do graphical programming and virtual environment design, and graduated in this specialism, right? And it meant that I spent a little bit of time in technology research environments, institutions, one in Germany in particular, which was about virtual environments. I don't know how much of that all makes sense to you or not, you or the listeners, but it was quite early interest, because at that time you could make virtual environments in two ways. One, you could be in a research institute and you'd have lots of high-end technology and quite high expensive technology, or you could make computer games, right? And the 3D graphics in computer games, as you could maybe play on a desktop PC, was getting just as good to do virtual environment design as the more expensive stuff. And so when I made my master's study, I actually used a very popular computer game called Unreal Tournament, which is one of these sort of first-person shooter games, you know, where you run around and you see the gun and you run around and you are in some virtual game space, 3D game space. It's called a first-person shooter, which sounds terrible, but what was special about this one, Unreal Tournament, was that it had a game editor. So when you bought the game to play on your PC, you also got the software to edit the levels. So you could make your own spaces to play in the computer game, right? And that was a very useful tool, because there was a lot of people on the internet, in chat forums and things like this, sharing how to use this tool, how to do these cool things, how to make your own levels, how to do this and that. And it was very cheap. I mean, you could buy this game for, I don't know, $20, right? And you could edit your own virtual space. The only problem was, of course, you had to get rid of the gun, right? Yeah. You had to get rid of all the players or the robots, the bots that were playing in the game automatically as part of the gameplay. You had to turn off many features. But if you turned off all those things and got rid of all the gun things and all the gameplay things, which are normally part of the computer game, then you have actually an editor to design and make your own virtual spaces and walk around in them, right? And
could actually, as a person, walk around them, or
no, just in the computer space, right? So as you would play a computer game, walking around the 3D space, you have a virtual environment there. it's a map, it's a design, which can be made in advance, which you can load up and walk around in the virtual space, like your eyes walking around this space. You don't do anything, you just move your mouse, right? But anyway, you can design a virtual space. And when I used this for my master thesis, it was quite unusual to use this game engine, it was called, for a computer game, to make things which are not about making games and not about shooting people and things like that, right? So for example, to give you a better idea, to illustrate something in some data design, which, because I was doing Master of Science, so it involved computer science, and it meant you had to maybe design the structure of information that you could experience inside this game space. What I was doing was making a virtual landscape as a memory, as a poem that you could walk around, right? It was actually the memory of my parents' garden.
Wow.
Right? In Scotland, which had been excavated because they had built a new house in the back garden. Right? So the garden memory that I had no longer existed because it was dug up and a new house was built there. And I made a little model of the garden with some pictures of grass, some picture of roses, blah, 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 some pictures of trees, as a memory of that space that I could move around virtually with my mouse, and so with your eyes. But what I had done with this project, with this master project, let's say, thesis project, was to make a poem inside of that garden space, the memory of a garden space. And I had recorded my voice speaking the words, right? So this has nothing to do with first-person shooters, nothing to do with computer games, but about making how you make memories and how you retell memories in a virtual way.
What a cool idea. Is that what you do more of now than anything else? Or
No, not at all. So, Carla, this was year 2000, year 2001.
Oh, wow.
It's like 17 years ago, right? But it's also what I'm interested in now. So I carry this idea through many things, but still, I no longer make anything with Unreal Tournament, of course, because it's an ancient now game. I no longer make virtual spaces, which you navigate with your eyes and a mouse. I'm not interested in virtual spaces at all as a computer game space, but I am interested in the memories that you can create and the memories that you hold and replay as stories. Yeah, and so sometimes now you can go back, you can write poems, or sometimes you can create situations where you meet people in real life, knowing that you create memories which later you can visit in the future. So let's say me sitting in this kitchen at the moment, and I could move my camera around if anyone wants to see. Should I show people the kitchen?
It's up to you.
I can. So it's a bit dark here. The light is above the table where I'm sitting, so you won't see so much, but just to give you an idea. Right? Here I am sitting in a kitchen in the center of Helsinki, right? And we are recording this at the moment in Zoom, right? And at the moment, it's been recorded probably on your hard disk because you're making a live recording. Somewhere in the future, there will be a memory of this conversation as digital file, a video of you and I talking to each other. What we won't have is everyone who's sitting here listening or watching, right? So what is missing from the record? What is missing from the thing left over from our meeting? It's of course everyone else who's not here in this recording, who are listening, not speaking, right? So even if we only have the digital file left of us speaking together, it's not going to reflect the reality. You would have to you'd have to tell a story about maybe everyone else who's in the room but not present, to get an accurate reflection of what's happening now, right? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Could you give our viewers a clearer idea
of course,
of what you mean by that? I
of
think
course,
I
of
know what
course
you
I can.
mean.
Okay, so of course I can. So what I'm really interested in as an artist, as a researcher, sometimes as a creative writer, is what is left behind from experiences, right? In the digital world that we live in, because we live in a mixture of non-digital experience and digital experience, right? At the moment, we are creating a digital experience together, you and I, Carla, by making a recording and having a conversation. We are also sitting in our respective places. You, I think, in Maryland, and me in Helsinki. And if we touch the table, if we hear something in the background, we have other things going on in our worlds. That's not part of the recording, right? So all that's being recorded is our conversation and our video image.
Right.
What is not being recorded also is all the people who are listening. So the event of this occasion, if you just look at the video file, is not accurate. It means that I don't know how many people at the moment are watching or listening to us, but if we don't know it and we have no idea where they are, and we don't know what's going on in their worlds, then we only have a very, very partial picture, a fragment of this situation we got now. And in the record of the digital file that we have left after this meeting, we only have a tiny little piece of what's happening at the moment. Right? It's like
very true. You just gave me an idea myself. Keep on going.
Sure.
I'm getting very excited.
Okay, so in the conversational work, in the dialogical work that you do, in these conversations, and in the dialogical work that I do in my work as an artist, who's interested in social activity and practices and conversations also, that's why I'm interested to have this conversation with you, we create little pieces at the end, fragments, splinters, leftovers, right? The things that are left behind. They do not reflect the reality of the situation, but it's all we've got. On your hard disk, it's all you've got. Of course, in your head, you might have something else. You might have lots of memories. You might have some feelings. You might also get new ideas, as you said, which are not yet formed into something. They might in the future form into something. Yeah? So they might in the future become an article, a text, a conversation, a picture, a poem, a theater play, another mobile video, another file on your hard disk. There's things not made yet, but all you have from this moment now will be a file on your hard disk as a material thing, right? It's hard to imagine that digital files are material, but they are. They exist in the material world, right? Even if they're digital, they exist in the material world. If your computer breaks and you cannot, or the power cable broke, you cannot turn on your computer anymore, your file doesn't exist to you, right?
That's true, unless it's on the internet and then you can get it get it.
Yeah,
But if it's just
yeah,
on your hard drive,
that's right.
it's
So
gone.
that's right. So we live in a much more complicated world nowadays than year 2000, right? Nowadays, after the 15 years of social media and sharing over the internet, then we no longer have just the files on our hard disk anymore. We have the files on our server. If we run our own server, we have the files on, in this case, at the moment, Zoom server. We have the temporary files that are downloading as everybody watches this file at the moment on their computers or on their phones. So no longer is there just one little piece left over from our conversation on your computer. There's a little piece everywhere.
What you put in my mind, and I got
Mm-hmm.
really excited about, is that you could even write a book all around one conversation and add people who you think would be listening. This person may be thinking that person, and how different each person may be seeing this conversation. I see it in the comments in the English show. People say, oh, this is boring. Well, you don't have to be there. Other people, oh, great conversation. And it's very interesting because they have different thoughts and different opinions, and I've learned not to get caught up in it because we're all different human beings and unique human beings.
I agree with you, Carla. That's very true. I mean, what is happening is a multiplication process that is totally out of your or my control, right? We have a very structured conversation now. We can make sure we stay on topic. We can decide when it ends, all these things. But for sure, we cannot control what happens when it goes out into the world nowadays, when it goes onto the files, file disks and servers and hard disks and memory cards to everyone who is watching this at the moment, both temporarily as a temporary file on their device, or as an actual recording that they decide to keep. Right? So it's out of our control. The multiplication process has already happened that we have to somehow accept, right? The fragments of a conversation are no longer just in our own heads. And this is really interesting situation. And it's one that has happened over the last 20 years because of exponentiality of social media. And the network cultures that we are involved with, intuitively or not, is a huge ecosystem that is way beyond any one person, right? So if you talk about this conversation being about me, well, it's not. It's about you in dialogue with me, actually. But for all the listeners, and if you're interested in peace studies or conflict resolution, then you'll be aware of the idea of a sort of dialogical listening, where in the process of listening, the meaning is made between you. You can never really understand what the other person is saying. You can only make your best guess. And so the meaning is always in between, right? It's a dialogue. The meaning making is a dialogue anyway.
It's interesting that you say that. And this happens every day, but I'm thinking about someone who came to the show today, whose English is questionable, but she's trying and she wants to learn, so I'm pushing her. And I'm like, but what is she really understanding? And where is it going? And it's not only her, it's everyone I speak to. And I'm always very careful that even if I'm in a yucky type mood, I don't show it because I need to help these people continue to converse and to feel comfortable.
Mhm.
with what's going on. I would love to have you at the English show if you would be interested.
One day we can do that. I have been in situations in Finland, in Latvia. I'm trying to think if there's been other occasions when I have gone as a native English speaker into a high school. Okay, and and I have done it also in a sort of occupational college or applied science university type context, where, let's say, I'm employed as a teacher because I'm speaking English. Okay, I may know certain things, or I may be able to share interesting subjects, especially, let's say, in digital media. But the reason of me being there is because the students need to practice in English, right? Listening and speaking and comprehension and interpretation and writing and things like this.
And I say that every day on the show, that
Sure.
if I am talking to you and you are talking at the same time, this is not a conversation. You ask me a question, give me a chance to answer before you say, okay, I understand. I didn't answer your question yet.
Well, that brings up another subject to me, which we have to keep in mind, that many people in many different places in the world have very different communication cultures.
Right.
And there are some which demand space. There are some which demand talking over each other, or finding the loudest voice, or mashing everything together at the same time, or in respectful positioning. So there are many cultures of communication.
Hold on. I need to mute myself for one moment. I hate to do it, but
That's okay.
Continue talking.
I will think what to say. Yeah. So we got into a very curious conversation here with Carla. As I said earlier in this interview, I'm very much interested in dialogue as part of my art practice, as part of my research subjects of interest, and having a conversation or doing things together in dialogue with another person has really been what I've been doing for over a decade of work. And quite often I make workshops which invite people to do things together with me. But as a workshop designer, maybe I help to frame the conditions to make it easy for someone to get involved, right? And this is in consideration of what you might call respect to being a host and to the guests that come into the space that you create. And for in other fields, maybe than arts practice or cultural production, it might be facilitation, and where you facilitate other people's conversation, where you facilitate the development of ideas among a group of people. But when you do this as cultural work, as artist work, then some people call it a social practice. Some people have called it socially engaged arts or participatory arts. If it involves media or technology, then it can sometimes be called participatory media. And of course, we have spent now, since the mid-2000s, you could argue, as a popular level, depending where you come from in the world. If you come from the United States, then you may have been involved in social media already for almost 15 years. If you come from some other parts of the world, you might have been doing it just for 8.
Yeah.
And so we have got into the idea that participation in a common platform, whether it be a website or a social media page or service, is something which we are doing online, often more often than we consciously do offline, in the real, like, on-life space. If you think there's an online space, there's an on-life space too, which is not in the internet. We don't think about necessarily our public spaces or our communities as participatory platforms, but we definitely think about our online spaces as something which is a participatory platform and software.
I need to
Carla.
interrupt you for a moment.
Mhm.
I'm going to keep this conversation going, but I have a water delivery coming in the middle of it. And
Fantastic.
when the guy comes in, the dog may bark, and I may
No,
need to mute myself for a few moments.
no, that's fine, Carla. The real life intervenes here. It's very appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make sure you were okay with that because it may get very crazy
Yeah.
for a moment.
Well, let the viewers enjoy the crazy.
I love it. That's why I picked up the phone and muted myself because they were supposed to come like 4 hours ago.
That's how life goes. Well, let the craziness go on in the background. I guess I'm conscious that it's quite late here, and I know that there is someone next door to where I'm sitting in the kitchen.
Excuse me. It should be 2 bottles. Okay. What? Oh, okay. As you can hear, the dog is going off. The
This is
bark
great.
alarm just began. And the empty ones are behind, closer to the dispenser. Yeah. Thank you. Take the empty ones, please. Thank you. You're right.
Carla,
Life happens.
no, it's good. I think to be honest, if we talk about peace studies and what is the role of dialogue in peace studies and the role maybe of artist work or cultural work in peace studies. For me, and I'm very interested in this subject, and for me, politics has often been a subject in the background of my cultural work. Sometimes of my artwork, sometimes of my creative writing, but like, and sometimes in my research. But the important thing is that we're questioning the assumptions that are made for us about how we can do things together with others, right? And who gets to decide how that is framed. So some in the on life space, not the internet, in the so-called real world, but I don't like to make distinction that the real world is not online. But anyway, in the space where we are physical beings and where we are in the world, material world, where if you unplug things don't work, we are losing the skills to talk to each other and listen to each other, right?
And that's my concern.
I understand that. I think that's what motivates you. And a paradox. You use the internet and the fantastic, wonderful ability to connect to anyone around the world in an almost direct way. Okay, sometimes there's a glitch, sometimes there's a pause, a delay, sometimes the real world intervenes, the dog barks. But you know, you can cut across all the troubles to get to what really matters, right? Which is trying to understand the differences that we all have, and to try to find at the same time, despite the differences, something that we all share, right? And what we can absolutely do, no matter what, is to share time with each other, and to spend time listening to each other. That's all. That's a fundamental, right? And somehow I understand that this is what you're doing here in your work.
It's very interesting you said that because this morning I have, as I said earlier, was quite hectic, crazy, you name it, nothing was going right. And right before I went online, I got a call from a very close friend. saying, and actually I thought it was the friend's child. And I'm like, why are you calling me now? You know I'm going live. And that's how I opened the conversation. And it ended up being the friend. And I was like, oh my gosh, I needed this. It made me smile, it made me laugh, and it made me want to go and do the work again. And sometimes we think, oh, someone needs to be physically present. But with the internet these days, and with our smartphones and all these crazy connections we have, it doesn't always need to be that. It just needs to be that connection, hearing that voice, seeing that person for a few moments, and we're lifted up.
Yeah, or that you just decide to commit an hour to something that you got no idea what happens and what is left behind.
You're right. Every time I do a show, I have no idea what is going to happen. And I went online today, and I'm telling you this story because I think it's relevant. And I thought, I just hope someone comes who I really know, feel comfortable with right away, because I really need this today. Guess what? I went online. I was beginning to do what I need to do to get it shared out. And before I even shared it out the first time, I had two people who I felt comfortable with coming in who could talk so I could share it out. And I was like, what a blessing. You know, what a wonderful job I have to be able to do this and move forward, although I was ready to say, I ain't doing the show today. You know, and I wasn't going to because too many people depend on it. But you made me realize the value, and I want to thank you.
Well, this is what the conversation is for too, right? It's a dialogue. If you thought that there was only one way, then that wouldn't be so true to the situation. What is interesting for me, as I've always said, is like in this dialogical situation, which is quite ephemeral. I mean, we're not making anything in particular here, except files on people's devices.
Right.
Yours, mine, the people who are listening. They might delete them, they might keep them, they might not exist actually just because the device moves on, right? You don't know what you leave behind in people's thoughts, in their memories, and what comes from that. There is a German philosopher which I'm very interested in. He's called Ernst Bloch. He is a utopian philosopher. Actually, he wrote most of his work in the 30s to 50s, 1930s to 1950s, as a way to try to think how can you create a sense of hope out of very dark times. And I find him very useful because I feel like we often live at the moment in these similar times, where it can be hard to understand where the hope comes from, and also that the potential of things is hard to see sometimes, right? It's dark, no? It's dark out here and it's dark in here, right? And what I appreciate about him is that and this is me only understanding it in English, not in German. There's several different ideas, but one of the ones which I carry the most on, and so I refer to it here now, is this idea of the not yet become, the thing that has not yet happened, right? It's the potentials that are created that haven't manifested into anything yet, right? It means that there's still hope for it to come. And so all these little bits and pieces that are left over from your conversations, from your English language sessions, from the connections that you make online, that your colleague and friend Rehan makes online and encourages other people to do online in a most extraordinary, exponential way. And I have witnessed it myself the last few months through my Facebook friendship with him. What creates, or what happens from that? I understand that from this network potential, this not yet become, you don't know what is going to happen. That is why you're willing to accept new Facebook friends or people you don't know, people from around the world that you don't know, to have 1 hour conversations with people you don't know, is that there is the potential of the not yet become. The little bits and pieces that are left on our devices, in our memories, the stories, the anecdotes, the glimpses of things, is the potential. This is what we can be hopeful for, that they might come to something good might come from them. And for me, this is a great contribution you make to peace studies.
Thank you so very, very much.
It's
conversation, we've been trying to have it for a while, but today, for me, this is a perfect conversation.
Well, perfect is that it carries on with other people, eh?
I know.
Carla, I think this is a good time to end, because I realize it's late here in Helsinki. Yeah. And I've enjoyed the conversation very much. It's given me many thoughts. There's a lot of jumping over and a lot of things not said, but hopefully in the gaps there is enough that people can fill in themselves. Eh?
Maybe we can do this again sometime.
Oh, why not? Eh?
And I am going to invite you to my Learn English show, because I would love to have you join us.
Well, I can promise that I'll do one. How about that?
That's all I can ask for.
Yeah. Carla, I wish you good night from Helsinki then, eh?
Okay, before you do that, we're going to go out with a laugh, but I want to remind people that this has been sponsored by the Institute of Peace, which is an organization promoting peace with one conversation at a time. And this is one of the more dramatic conversations I'm very fortunate to have. And with that, we will laugh a little.
Yeah, let's.
With a smile.